Last summer, a first-time gardener in Ohio built a beautiful raised bed, filled it with soil, planted tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce. And by August, half the plants were stunted, the wood was already warping, and the soil looked more like a brick than dirt. She did everything she thought was right. She just didn't know about 5 mistakes that quietly ruin more raised beds than anything else. If you're about to build your first raised bed or you already built one and something feels off, stay with me for the next few minutes. Because these 5 mistakes are the ones extension offices and experienced growers point to again and again, and every single one of them is completely avoidable if you catch it early. Raised beds are supposed to make gardening easier, better drainage, less bending over, more control over your soil, fewer weeds, and a cleaner-looking garden overall. That's the promise, and honestly, when a raised bed is set up correctly, it delivers on all of it. But a raised bed done wrong is really just an expensive box full of problems, sitting right there in your backyard reminding you every day that something's not working. And the frustrating part is, most of these mistakes don't show up on day 1. They show up 2 months later, when your plants are already in the ground. Your money is already spent, and it's too late to start over without tearing the whole thing apart. So let's walk through exactly what goes wrong, why it happens, and how you fix it before it costs you a whole growing season. Mistake number 1 is putting the bed in the wrong spot. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but it's the mistake that's hardest to undo. Because once a raised bed is built and filled with soil, moving it is a huge job. Most vegetables need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day to actually produce well. Not 6 hours of bright shade, 6 hours of real, direct sun. A lot of beginners look at a spot in spring, see plenty of light, and don't account for trees fully leafing out by June, or a fence casting a longer shadow later in the season. Before you build anything, watch your yard for a full day, at different times, and be honest about how much real sun that spot gets. Also think about drainage. A low spot where water pools after rain will drown your roots no matter how good your soil is. And keep some distance from large trees because roots travel far underground and will grow straight up into loose, moist, raised bed soil looking for nutrients. Get the location right the first time because this is the one mistake you basically can't fix later without starting over. Take a notebook or just your phone and check that spot at 9 in the morning, at noon, and again around 4 in the afternoon for at least a few days before you commit to a location. It feels slow, but it's the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy for this project. Mistake number 2 is building the bed too wide. This one seems harmless, and it's actually one of the most common mistakes gardeners make. It feels natural to build a big, generous bed, more space, more plants, right? But if you can't comfortably reach the center of that bed from the side, you're going to end up stepping into it to plant, weed, or harvest. And every time you step on that soil, you compact it. Compacted soil is exactly what a raised bed is supposed to prevent in the first place. Because roots need loose, airy soil to spread out and grow. The general rule that keeps coming up from experienced growers is to keep your bed no wider than about 3 to 4 feet if you can access it from both sides, and no wider than roughly 2.5 feet if it's against a wall or a fence and you can only reach it from one side. It's a small detail at the planning stage, but it decides whether your soil stays healthy for years or gets compacted within one season. And while you're planning width, think about length too, and how many beds you actually want in that space. Because you'll also need room between beds to walk, kneel, and get a wheelbarrow through without trampling anything. Mistake number 3, and honestly this is probably the biggest one, is using the wrong soil. A lot of first-time gardeners either use plain garden soil straight from the ground, or they fill the whole bed with bagged potting soil. Both are mistakes, just in different directions. Regular garden soil compacts easily and drains poorly once it's sitting in a raised bed, and it can carry weed seeds or soil-borne diseases with it. Potting soil alone, on the other hand, is made for containers and often drains too fast in a raised bed, so your plants dry out constantly no matter how often you water. What actually works and what shows up consistently in raised bed guidance is a blended mix, something like a combination of topsoil, compost, and an aeration material like perlite or coarse sand. That blend gives you soil that holds moisture without staying soggy, drains well without drying out in an hour, and has the nutrients your plants actually need. And don't just fill the top few inches and call it done. Most edible crops, especially root vegetables, need at least 12 inches of good soil to grow properly. with 18 inches being even better if you're growing anything with deeper roots. If your bed is deeper than that, you can fill the very bottom with organic material like dried leaves, straw, or old compost to save on soil costs. But keep at least the top 12 to 18 inches as your actual growing mix, because that's the zone where most of the root activity happens. Mistake number 4 is not planning your watering before you plant. Here's something a lot of beginners don't expect. Raised beds dry out faster than in-ground gardens, because that loose, well-draining soil that makes raised beds great also means water moves through it quickly, especially in hot weather. If you don't have a plan for consistent watering, you'll swing between overwatering and underwatering without even realizing it, and that stress shows up as wilting, cracked tomatoes, or stunted growth. A lot of beginners also default to overhead watering with a hose or sprinkler, which feels normal, but it wets the leaves. And wet leaves sitting in the sun or overnight is exactly what encourages fungal problems like powdery mildew and blight. The fix isn't complicated. Water at the base of the plant, not over the top, and if you can, set up a simple drip line or soaker hose before you plant, not after. It costs very little up front and saves you from a summer of guessing whether your garden is thirsty or drowning. Even something as simple as sticking your finger a couple of inches into the soil before you water, instead of watering on a fixed schedule, will save more plants than almost any other single habit, because it tells you what the soil actually needs instead of what the calendar says. And mistake number 5 is choosing the wrong building material or building it too flimsy. This is the one that doesn't hurt your plants right away, but it hurts your wallet down the road. A lot of first-timers go for the thinnest, cheapest boards they can find at the hardware store, because a raised bed is already an investment and thin wood looks like an easy way to save money. But thin wood warps, rots, and starts falling apart within a couple of years, especially once it's holding wet soil against it all season. Because a raised bed is already an investment, and thin wood looks like an easy way to save money. And if you go with wood that's chemically treated, know what's in it, because some older treatments contain chemicals that can leach into your soil over time. Metal raised beds have become popular for exactly this reason. They don't rot, and if you take care of them, they last for years without needing to be rebuilt. Whatever material you choose, think of it as something we're building once and using for a decade, not something you're replacing every other season. Spending a little more up front on the frame is almost always cheaper in the long run than rebuilding the same bed twice in 5 years, on top of losing the soil and plants that go down with it when a wall finally gives out. So to bring it all together, get your location right before you build, because you can't easily move it later. Keep your bed narrow enough to reach without stepping in it. Use a real soil blend, not just garden soil or straight potting mix. Plan your watering system before the first seed goes in the ground. And don't cheap out on the material holding all of that soil together. None of these fixes cost much time or money if you handle them at the planning stage. They only get expensive and frustrating once you've already planted and discovered the problem the hard way, usually right around the point in the season when it's too late to start over. What's worth remembering is that almost none of these mistakes are about talent or having a green thumb. They're planning mistakes, made before a single seed goes in the ground. And every one of them is something you can catch simply by slowing down for a day or two before you build. The gardeners who end up with thriving raised beds year after year usually aren't doing anything exotic. They're just getting these 5 basics right from the very first season and letting good soil, good sun, and good water do the rest of the work. If you're planning your first raised bed this season, which of these 5 mistakes were you already about to make? Tell me in the comments. I actually read them. And if this saved you from making one of these mistakes, subscribe. Because next time we're breaking down exactly what it actually costs to fill a raised bed with the right soil, and whether the cheaper option is really worth it.